character studies, okay? It's called character studies. What do we think? Does anyone have a guess? If our unit is called character studies, what do you guys think we're going to be maybe focusing on? Kamaya, what do you think, sweetie?
People and books.
Yeah, exactly. People in books. So characters are the people in books, mostly fiction books, right? Because fiction books are usually stories that are made up, okay? And there's characters, they have names, they have personalities. Maybe they're mean, nice, lazy, smart, determined, worry a lot. These are their character traits, okay? So we are actually going to be reading a new book together. It is called Because of Winn-Dixie. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of this book, read this book, maybe watched the movie. Oscar has.
I've watched the movie and read the book.
Awesome. So you know a little bit about it already. Don't spoil it, okay? Because I know you know a lot. Okay. So we're going to be reading this. This is going to be our new kind of read aloud book, okay? So right now, I'm going to read chapter 1 and 2 to you, okay? So all you have to do right now is be listening. So remember, we're doing character studies. So do you think I want you, when I'm reading this, do you think I want you to focus on where the story takes place? No. Do you think I want you to focus on the cover right now?
No.
No, I want you to focus on the people in the book, the characters, okay? Because we're going to be learning about the characters and their traits, okay? All right, I'm going to give you a hint for this one because we're going to talk about it in our mini lesson. Think about characters. When they're introduced in the book, when you first learn about them, how do they talk? What are some of the things they say? How do they act? What are some of the things they do, okay? So I'm going to read chapter 1. I'll share my document camera. I don't think there's any pictures in this book, so you guys are going to have to do a really good job. Remember, kind of making the movie in your head, okay? So I'm going to read. So if you want to close your eyes while I read, you're more than welcome to, and try to picture what's happening as a movie in your head, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and read. My name is India Opal Bulani. And last summer, my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes. And I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn-Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there, all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. Who let that dog in here? He kept on shouting. Who let that dirty dog in here? At first, I didn't see a dog. There was just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers. And there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees running around and waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly. He looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out and he was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that is what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off the display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and the onions and the green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the store manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that all he wanted was to get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow he ended up knocking the manager over. And the manager must have really been having a bad day because lying there on the floor, right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. Please, somebody, said the manager. Somebody call the pound. Wait a minute, I hollered. That's my dog. Don't call the pound. All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around and looked at me and knew I had done something big. And I knew I had done something big. And maybe stupid too. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't let this dog go to the pound. So this wasn't her dog. But she was going to pretend that it was just so the dog wouldn't be sent to the pound. Here, boy, I said. The dog stopped licking the manager's face and put his ears up to the air and looked at me, like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. Here, boy. So she's probably calling him boy because obviously this isn't her dog, so she doesn't know what his name is. Here, boy, I said again. Then I figured that the dog was probably just like everybody else in the world and that he would want to get called by a name. Only I did not know what his name was. So I just said the first thing that came to my head. I said, here, Winn-Dixie. It was the store she was in. And the dog came trotting over to me just like he had been doing his whole life. Just like he had been doing it his whole life. The manager sat up and gave me a hard stare. Like maybe I was making fun of him. It's his name, I said, honest. The manager said, don't you know not to bring your dog into a grocery store? Yes, sir, I told him. He got in by mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Come on, Winn-Dixie, I said to the dog. I started walking and he followed along behind me as I went out of the produce department and down the cereal aisle and past all the cashiers out the door. Once we were safe outside, I checked him over real carefully, and he didn't look that good. He was big but skinny. You could see his ribs. And there were bald patches all over him, places where he didn't have any fur at all. Mostly, he looked like a piece of old brown carpet that had been left out in the rain. You're a mess, I told him. I bet you don't belong to anybody. He smiled at me. He did that thing again, where he pulled back his lips and showed me his teeth. He smiled so big that it made him sneeze. It was like he was saying, I know I'm messy. Isn't it funny? It's not hard to immediately fall in love with a dog who has a good sense of humor. Come on, I told him. Let's see what the preacher has to say about you. And the two of us, me and Winn-Dixie, started walking home. All right, so we have two characters so far. Well, main characters. We have Opal, the girl, or India, the girl. India Opal, what's her last name? India Opal Bulani. Then we have Winn-Dixie, the dog. All right, we have one more chapter, which is just a few pages. That summer, I found Winn-Dixie was also the summer me and the preacher moved to Naomi, Florida, so he could be the new preacher at an Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. My daddy is a good preacher and a nice man, but sometimes it's hard for me to think about him as my daddy because he spends so much time preaching or thinking about preaching or getting ready to preach. And so in my mind, I think of him as the preacher. Before I was born, he was a missionary in India, and that is how I got my first name. But he calls me by my second name, Opal, because that was his mother's name, and he loved her a lot. So we're learning that she goes by Opal, okay, and her dad's a preacher. Anyway, while me and Winn-Dixie walked home, I told him how I got my name, and I told him how I just moved to Naomi, and I also told him about the preacher and how he was a good man. Okay, there's a character trait. So her dad, the preacher, is a good guy. He's good. Even if he was too distracted with sermons and prayers and suffering people to go grocery shopping. But you know what? I told Winn-Dixie, you are a suffering dog, so maybe he will take you right away. Maybe he will let me keep you. Winn-Dixie looked right at me and wagged his tail. He was kind of limping like something was wrong with one of his legs. And I have to admit, he stunk bad. He was an ugly dog, but already I loved him with all my heart. When we got to the Friendly Corners trailer park, I told Winn-Dixie that he had to behave right and be quiet because this was an all-adult trailer park, and the only reason I got to live in it was because the preacher was a preacher and I was good, quiet kid. All right, there's some more character traits. Good, quiet. So those are character traits that are just told to us, okay? It's right in the book. Other character traits, we kind of have to think in our head and use the things that maybe the character says or the character does to kind of think about, okay, does this make them a good person, a bad person, smart, lazy, funny, kind? Let's see. Corners Trailer Park manager, Mr. Alfred, called an exception. And I told Winn-Dixie he had to act like an exception too. Specifically, I told him to not pick fights with any of Mr. Alfred's cats or Misty Whittler's little yappy Yorkie dog Samuel. Winn-Dixie looked up at me while I was telling him everything, and I swear he understood. Sit, I told him when we got to my trailer. He sat right down. He had good manners. Stay here, I told him. I'll be right back. The preacher was sitting in the living room, working on a little fold-out table. He had paper spread out all around him, and he was rubbing his nose, which always means he's thinking hard. Daddy, I said. Hmm? He said back. Daddy, do you know how you always tell me that we should help those less fortunate than ourselves? Mm-hmm, he said. He rubbed his nose, looked around his papers. Well, I said, I found a less fortunate at the grocery store. Is that right? He said. Yes, sir, I told him. I stared at the preacher really hard. Sometimes he reminded me of a turtle hiding inside its shell, in there thinking about things and not even sticking his head out into the world. Daddy, I was wondering, could this less fortunate, could he stay with us for a while? Finally, the preacher looked up at me. Opal, he said, what are you talking about? I found a dog, I told him, and I want to keep him. No dogs, the preacher said. We've talked about this before. You don't need a dog. I know it, I said. I know I don't need a dog, but this dog needs me. Look, I said. I went to the trailer door and hollered, Winn-Dixie! Winn-Dixie's ears shot up in the air and he grinned and sneezed. And then he came limping up the steps into the trailer, put his head right into the preacher's lap, right on top of a pile of papers. The preacher looked at Winn-Dixie. He looked at his ribs, his matted up fur, and places where he was bald. The preacher's nose wrinkled up. Like I said, the dog smelled pretty bad. Winn-Dixie looked up at the preacher. He pulled his lips back and showed the preacher all of his crooked yellow teeth and wagged his tail and knocked some of the preacher's papers off the table. Then he sneezed and some more papers fluttered to the floor. What did you call this dog? The preacher said. Winn-Dixie, I whispered. I was afraid to say anything too loud. I could see that Winn-Dixie was having a good effect on the preacher. He was making him poke his head out of his shell. Well, said the preacher, he's a stray if I've ever seen one. So a stray dog is a dog that runs around and doesn't have a home. He put down his pencil and scratched Winn-Dixie behind the ear. And less fortunate too, that's for sure. Are you looking for a home? The preacher asked real soft to Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie wagged his tail. Well, the preacher said, I guess you found one. All right, so we're going to stop there. So that's chapter 1 and chapter 2. So this is a picture of what Winn-Dixie looks like. So kind of like a terrier-looking dog. Kind of rough hair, kind of gets all tangled up. All right, so that was, I'm going to start real quick right here. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys something. Okay, so every year before the school year starts, every single teacher that you've ever had, every teacher in every single school, every state, all over the world, they always are thinking the same thing before the school year starts. They're thinking, what are my new students going to be like? So as we're always putting our classroom together, we're always thinking, Are they going to be like the kids I had before last year? Are they going to be different kids? Are they going to play together at recess, or are they going to kind of split up into little groups? Are they going to be ready to laugh and have a good time during our read alouds, or are they going to be kind of quiet and shy? So every time when teachers get a new class, they're always full of questions on what you guys are going to be like. So then you guys come into our class on the first day of school. And very quickly, we teachers, we start to get to know you guys, okay? We notice who you like to sit next to, who do you talk to, what kind of books you pick. We notice the things you keep in your desk, the way you talk, the kind of things you like to do. All of this noticing kind of tells us about the person you are. So, and you know what? The way that teachers get to know a class full of students, which I got to know you guys, is the same way that readers get to know characters in the book, okay? And that's what you guys are going to be doing. So I want to teach you guys that when readers begin a new book, they are given some new friends. So think of the characters as our new friends, okay? Readers get to know the characters in the book in a much same way as you guys might get to know a new friend, okay? Taking notice of how the characters talk, act, figuring out what they are like, okay? So we started, like I said, we started a new unit today. So in this unit, you guys are going to become experts at learning about characters in the book, okay? And as you read, it's kind of like we're becoming friends with them, okay? So we're going to start together right now, and our latest friend is Opal. Okay, we just read all about Opal. So we've only just begun getting to know her because we really only read like 5 pages, and this is a pretty long book, okay? So we're only beginning to know her. We read the first 2 chapters, but I know that observant readers, so readers who pay attention, they can learn a lot, just even from a small amount of a story. So let's get to know Opal. So ready to learn, let's get ready to learn about her by paying attention to how she talks, how she acts. So give me a thumbs up. So when you're ready, give me a thumbs up. We're going to be turning our brains on, and I'm going to read a little section, and then we're going to be paying attention to how she talks and how she acts, okay? All right, so you guys listen. We're going to revisit a couple parts that I just read. So remember this part after the store manager sees the chaos that the dog created in a store. So he said, please, said the manager, somebody call the pound. What did Winn-Dixie, what did Opal do? Who knows? What did Opal do when that guy yelled, let's call the pound? What did Opal do? Mohammed, what did Opal do?
He said, please, leave him, and please.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So Opal, she said, wait a minute. Look right here. I pulled it up. Can you guys see this? The store manager said, please, said the manager, somebody call the pound. Opal, without even thinking, she said, wait a minute. She hollered, that's my dog. Don't call the pound. And all the Winn-Dixie employees turned and looked at me. And I knew I had done something big and maybe stupid too. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound. Here, boy, I said. So think real quick and raise your hand if you have an opinion. What did we learn about Opal in that section? What would you say? What would that section describe Opal as? Good person, bad person, Carrie? What do you think? Kwaku, what do you think, bud?
A good person.
I would say a good person because she knew that if that dog went to the pound, something bad might happen. So she stepped in because she did not want that dog to go to the pound, okay? We saw her doing something interesting. She stood up to the manager. So remember, she's just probably about your age. And she stood up to an adult. And she said, he's kind of, let's see, this manager, he kind of seems a little scary, okay? So she stood up to the manager and she said, no, wait, that dog's mine, even though she's never seen that dog before, okay? Never seen it. So she didn't just say it either. She hollered it. What does hollered mean? What's another word for hollered? Who knows what hollered mean? Destiny, what's another word for hollered? If I said, I hollered something to you, am I saying it quietly? Or am I saying it loudly? What does hollered mean? Who knows? Who knows what hollered means? All right, so hollered means to shout. Holler means to shout something. So she didn't just say, wait a minute. She said, wait a minute. She hollered it. She yelled it. So that kind of tells us even more that she even feels more passionately about this dog, okay? All right, we're going to read another section. So you guys can look while I read it, okay? Anyway, so we're going to read this part, and I want to see what else we can notice, okay? So you'll remember that this is the part where Opal starts getting Winn-Dixie ready to take to her dad, the preacher, right? So we just read this, so it should be really fresh in your head. So I'm going to read it. You just pay attention. I'm going to start here with anyway. Anyway, while me and Winn-Dixie walked home, I told him how I got my name, and I told him how I had just moved to Naomi. I also told him about the preacher and how he was a good man, even if he was too distracted with sermons and prayers and stuff that people go to the grocery and suffering people to go to the grocery store. But you know what? I told Winn-Dixie, you are a suffering dog, so maybe he'll take you right on away. Maybe he'll let me keep you. Winn-Dixie looked up at me and wagged his tail. He was kind of limping like something was wrong with one of his legs. And I have to admit, he stunk. Bad. He was an ugly dog. But already, I loved him with all my heart. All right, let's think this over real quick. Let's think this over. Think in your head. Think about, okay, what does this section tell us about Opal? What kind of person she is? So put what you're noticing together with stuff we already talked about with Opal, okay? So this is just the beginning of the book, but already we are coming to know Opal as you would a new friend, okay? So she doesn't care that Winn-Dixie is a mess, doesn't care that he walks funny, doesn't care that he smells bad. She loves him. She loves this dog. She even named him, okay? So Opal does seem to care a lot about Winn-Dixie. She loves this dirty dog right away, enough to fight for him. So I wonder if she feels the same way about other things and other people in her life. So do you see, as we start a new book, we get to know the character by noticing what he or she does and says. So look at this. Notice how the character talks and acts. That is such a big thing I want us to remember today, okay? How the character talks and acts, okay? So let's look at here. Here's kind of a little chart we have. All right? Name of our character is Opal. What does she do? She stood up to the manager. She hollered. So her trait could be ambitious. She's not afraid. She fights what she believes in. She's nice. She's kind. We could put all that in the trait here. So we could say she fights for what she wants. She's kind. Nice. She's determined. She was determined to get that dog, right? She was also determined to convince her dad. Perfect. Okay. So this, if you look at this, this is kind of similar to what we're going to be doing today in your independent reading, okay? So it may seem obvious to notice what a character does and says, and I know that you guys have learned to do this in previous years, but there's a reason that I'm really, really focusing on it right now, okay? Noticing these things about a character is one of the most important things that you guys as a fiction reader can do, okay? Think about how much time it takes to understand your friend. Think of a friend you have and put them in your head right now. Think of your friend. Think about how much time it takes to understand them. In the same way, it takes time to understand our book characters, okay? So today we noticed some important things about Opal, but there's still a lot more that I'm sure we're going to be learning and that I'm sure we're going to be adding to our list of impressions, okay? So as you guys are going to read your own books today on Epic or maybe a book you have at home, I want you to take what we did with you, okay? Pay attention to the things that the characters say, that they do. And then how would you describe these characters? Are they nice, mean, funny, ambitious, lazy? Do they worry a lot? Are they scared, shy? So before we get started though, okay, I want to show you how you're going to be kind of keeping these notes, okay? Because it's a little harder. Everything's a little harder since we're not in school, okay? So I want